So for this lecture, we want to discuss the police detective, who is a very different type of detective from private detective. So whereas the private detective usually works in the interest of their clients or in their own interests, the police detective serves the greater good and was sworn to uphold the law and to protect the public against people who break it, such as the people that the private detective usually works for. Now in movies, most of the time you're going to see some kind of a series of obstacles that the police detective has to overcome, because if it were, just as easy as him serving the law and protecting people, then it wouldn't be a very interesting story. But most of the time they're going to run into procedural and political obstacles, and they're going to have to somehow break through those in order to actually protect the public against the lawbreakers. Now, even though most of us tend to think of police detectives representing the establishment, representing the man, so to speak, most of the time, and most of the films we're going to watch where we have someone who becomes a renegade or a rogue detective, they're going to be kind of working against the establishment, even though they work for it. So what they're going to be doing is they're going to be exposing the weaknesses and the flaws of the system, the legal system in particular, and kind of showing how it's almost impossible to really protect people against lawbreakers when the lawbreakers themselves oftentimes are protected by the law at the same time. So the 1970s was when the renegade cop became kind of a common portrayal of law enforcement, and partly that was because without the Hollywood production code in place anymore, it was something that was now going to be allowed, whereas dirty cops were really pretty uncommon in those earlier films because we needed a positive representation of law enforcement for the purposes of the code. So in the 1970s, that wasn't necessary anymore, and we start seeing that. We also have the whole post-Vietnam thing going on as well, and a lot of people are kind of challenging authority and also kind of changing the way that they looked at the government and the way they looked at governmental institutions. So two films in particular definitely portray this. One is The French Connection, which is kind of the arty version of this from 1971. Very kind of entertaining and also interesting film at the same time. I highly recommend it. For this class, we're going to watch Dirty Harry instead. Seems to fit into the class a little bit better, and that's often seen as more of kind of the right-wing view, or the kind of the meat and potatoes portrayal of the renegade cop. So in this particular film, our main character is Harry Callahan, played by Clint Eastwood, of course. He's serving the law, but he's breaking just as many as he ends up serving, partly because he's running into a lot of these obstacles. Not a big fan of criminals. He tends to be a little bit of a sadist, and doesn't like his authority figures either. He's running into a lot of issues there as well, and he ends up almost completely destroying his case while trying to actually make it at the same time. So once again, he's running into these roadblocks and just bulldozes right through it with his .44 Magnum pistol. Not probably the most realistic portrayal of law enforcement, but very common, and it kind of set the mold for the action film, which would continue through the 70s and into the 1980s.